Yo, what's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out the podcast. This is your host, Dan Giffen. Wanted to let you know before today's podcast, if you do not yet own Ableton 10 Suite or Standard, I can hook you up. I'm an official reseller and can give you special discount pricing because there's a lot of us out there that are starving artists, and why not save money? So I can't say exactly how much I can on the podcast, but if you go to liveproducersonline.com/buyableton, that's liveproducersonline.com/buyableton, I can hook you up with a special discount. So hit me up there if you're interested in owning the newest version of Ableton Live, Standard or Suite, and I'd be happy to hook you up. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. I am your host, Dan Giffen, and today I'm really excited for our special guest. His name is Bobby Owsinski. He's been in the industry for a very long time. He is an author, a mixing engineer, producer, songwriter. He wears a lot of hats. He's been doing it for a long time. He actually, I read, was one of the first to dive into surround sound mixing, which I think is pretty cool. He has credits working with some major artists like The Who, Willie Nelson, Neil Young, Iron Maiden, The Ramones. We could go on and on about that. As an educator, Bobby is taught at Berklee College of Music. He has some really cool books: the Mixing Engineer Handbook, Recording Engineer Handbook, Survival Guide for Making Music in the Internet Age. That's enough about that. Bobby, thanks for being on the podcast, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, for sure. I actually met you and saw you speak at GearFest at Sweetwater this year, and it was an awesome presentation. You spoke, the title of your presentation was Ways to Distribute Your Music Online. And for me, and I think a lot of listeners on this podcast, this is kind of a new realm as far as how do you really make money posting your music online these days in the streaming world and everything else. And so I'm excited to pick your brain about a lot of that over this podcast. But first, before we dive into that and kind of talk through some of the presentation, and I learned a ton. Before we dive into that, I want to get to know you a little bit better for our listeners. So how did you get started with music? Like, where did it start in your career?
Oh, I was a player for a long time. Okay. That was my first career, and primarily as a guitar and a keyboard player. And I did a lot of touring and a lot of studio work. And to make a long story short, there comes a point in time where it's no longer fun, where it's a lot of work. And I happened to be the musical director for an artist. It wasn't a good tour. Let's just put it like that. And it did it for me. At the end, it was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. So then I transitioned entirely into the studio. That was career 2. Yeah,
honestly, there's something to be said about being able to wear sweatpants to work and not have to like leave the house if you're working in the studio. But
well, for me, that was career 3, actually.
Oh, okay.
Career 2, working in the studio. Of course, nobody had their own studios because it was expensive.
Yeah.
So, you needed a big console and an expensive tape machine. Mm-hmm. So, you were dressing up a little bit to go out because you were going out and you're going in front of clients, and clients basically want to see it presentable. So
that's fair. That makes sense. Yeah, and now it seems like everybody calls their small little bedroom a studio because everybody can work in the box.
Yeah, and well, they should. But, there's still some magic to the big studios. Nothing sounds like that. And you can do great things at home. You should do great things at home, but it's great to experience the real thing sometimes, too.
Sure. No, this is true. I've been lucky enough to be in some larger studios in Indianapolis, where I'm based now. It's hard to fit a 60-channel API in my bedroom right now.
Yeah.
But cool. So you started out as a musician playing, and then that kind of evolved into working into commercial studios.
Yeah. I went to college for electronic engineering because I kind of wanted to know where all the electrons went from my guitar to the amplifier and everything. It was pretty selfish, actually, what I was thinking about. But I have to say, I've always been into that. So I've always been twiddling with electronics and fixing and building and things like that. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to technology, I've been doing it a long time, and I can't say I've been in the cutting edge all the time, but I've tried to.
Yeah.
So even now, I try to stay as close to the whatever's new, whatever's the latest technology as I can.
Yeah. I have tons of respect for that. I really do, because I've been an in the box kind of guy, and now we have tape machine emulations, and
Don't get me started on that.
I mean, it's easy to pop open software and just be like, oh yeah, I know how it works. But it's a lot of people, and myself included, don't always really appreciate the true analog hard sweat tears that went into calibrating a machine before every recording session.
Oh yeah, that was a giant pain. I have no nostalgia at all for the old days, for the old tape days. And as far as tape emulators, I could care less about them. And I'll tell you why. Back when I was recording on analog, you'd hear something from the musicians coming off the floor in the studio, and it would sound great just going through the console. Then it would go through the tape machine, and it would come back, and it wouldn't sound the same. And it would make me crazy. It was like, well, why doesn't it sound like it sounded like in the console? Why, I never thought it sounded better. So I don't have this fascination for this tape emulation, because I just never liked the sound of tape to begin with.
That's funny. Yeah. I've heard both sides. Some people are wildly obsessed with them, and other people could care less.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain thing. Yeah, I guess there's a glue, but if you do it right, you get glue on your mix anyway. So yeah. I don't see the point of it myself.
Just slap a compressor on it; it'll glue it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sort of. Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that.
And it's funny though, because we're used to doing that with slapping a compressor across everything. And, back in the old days, they had 2 compressors to work with, or 4, and that was it. And I can remember being in studios where there'd only be 2. So you'd have to be very judicious how you used them.
Yeah.
But, you made it work. It still sounded good.
Yeah.
And you go back to listen and listen to those records from way, way back, and you go, wow, that sounds pretty good. And there wasn't a lot of technology involved, and it still sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy, I find, a lot of times, for me anyway, to get lost in so many options these days. Especially with plugins. I mean, you have too many choices. Sometimes you lose the simplicity of, if it just sounds good, it sounds good.
Yeah. And they're all good. That's the other thing. Plugins have gotten way, way, way better. Mm-hmm. In the early days of digital, everybody hated the way plugins sounded, especially if you're used to analog gear. And now it's so close that, I even diehards I know will go that way.
Yeah.
They're no longer diehards because they just work. They sound good. They're repeatable, which is the big thing. God, one of the things that you and probably many of your listeners never had the pleasure to do, and I say pleasure tongue in cheek, is doing a recall on something. And it would take you a full day to just get everything set up the way it was, and it never came back the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would make you crazy, because you're trying to catch your tail the whole time. It's like, well, okay, you needed this, I gave you this, but everything else over here is wrong now.
Yeah.
So
you have like 2 different sounding instruments from 2 different people recording the same song.
God, and you look at the recall sheets and you go, well, it says it's the same. They look the same. Why doesn't it sound the same?
Yep. For all of you millennial music producers out there, myself included, count yourself to be very grateful and for what we have today, not having to recall everything.
Well, honestly, that's one of the reasons why a lot of my contemporaries have gone in the box. Mm-hmm. And it was after it got to the point where it sounded pretty good, and everybody admits, okay, it might not be 100% of being totally analog, but it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But now you can do recalls, and now you can work on 4 songs at the same time if you want.
Yeah.
And you work on this for 3 hours, and you work on that for 4 hours, and that's the way everybody does it. I mean, it doesn't matter what your age group is here, what your demographic is. We all work the same now for the most part.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think you and I could probably talk about mixing all day long. I love this kind of stuff. I love this stuff. But one reason I'm really excited to have you on the podcast as well is because you're very knowledgeable about streaming online and royalties and all these things, and you have some really great blog articles written around that. One thing I want to kind of talk through is your presentation that you had at GearFest, which I thought was fantastic. When we're talking about that, you titled the presentation "Ways to Distribute Your Music Online." First of all,
no, actually, it was 5 steps to distribute, promote, and make money from music streaming was the name of it.
Okay, I stand corrected. Thank you.
I'm actually looking at it right now, so I figured I better have this up just in case you ask me something I don't remember.
Right. Yeah. For a second, I'm like, this is the right presentation, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. So there's a lot of distributors out there. I mean, we talked about you. At one point, you could distribute straight through Spotify, which seems like that's changed recently. SoundCloud has opened themselves up for that. There's a DistroKid, which is what I personally use for my own music in my band. There's a lot of options. CD Baby.
That's my favorite too. Yeah, DistroKid.
Yeah. So from your perspective, you've done a lot of reviews on all these different distributors. Is there one that you would consider better for a specific type of artist, and why? Like, which, in your opinion?
I haven't done reviews. I haven't done in-depth personal experiences with all of them, I must admit. I know about them, and I know about all of the intricacies of most of them, and I've played with them, and I've tried most of them, but I can't say I know them in depth. That being said, I know them enough to understand what's going on and what the differences are. And really, when it comes down to it, it's a matter of not only money, but it's how much you're going to get at the end, how long it's going to take you to get it. Okay. There are some, and I don't want to name names because I don't want to get in trouble, but there's some distributors that are, they're publishing agreements. You get caught in a publishing agreement without quite understanding that. That you're, and next thing you know, you can't get out of it for a year. And so you have to be careful about things like that. There are other ones that are fairly transparent, and DistroKid, that seems to be the easiest and somewhat the cheapest. It's a great deal. SoundCloud, one of the things I mentioned in this presentation was I think every musician should have a SoundCloud account. And the reason why is SoundCloud is the best place, first of all, for hosting audio. It's great. But second of all, just for having a kind of a playground, put your stuff up and get some feedback. And if it doesn't work, it's really easy to take it down.
Yeah.
You can't do that on Spotify or Apple Music or something. It'll take a couple of weeks to take it down. And, you've kind of defeated the purpose of the whole thing.
So when you mean testing a song, are you thinking of feedback from like the comments of a song that's uploaded to SoundCloud, or do you mean like maybe how many streams you get within a short period of time because it's starting to take off and it just seems like a better hit?
Well, I think it's more the comments that you would get if it's doing what you're expecting it to, and you might throw an email or a message out, a post to social post to your followers and say, take a listen to this, see what you think, and is it going in the right direction? That in some way that kind of violates the way an artist works, because you should be working from your heart.
Yeah, right.
But there's a certain amount of group testing that we do, and and if you're not sure either way, why not get some feedback? Because sometimes that's the case too, especially if you're doing your own stuff. You might say, well, I'm just not sure. Does it need a bridge or does it not? Or, is this beat working? Or, there's so many different things that you might as well get some feedback.
Right.
And SoundCloud's a wonderful place for that, because you can get the feedback. And like I say, you can take something down, put something new up in a flash.
Yeah, that's true. And I know that if you pay one of their premium plans, which I do as an artist, you can actually replace the file. There's been times where maybe I made a different change to the same track and I just re-uploaded it and I didn't lose my stats or comments or anything.
Yeah, I know. That's really critical too.
Yeah, which is nice. Yeah, so we talked about SoundCloud. That's a good testing ground. I've done those things. Let's talk about maybe after that process. So a lot of times, we've been hearing so much like, well, you're not going to really make money streaming online to Spotify. They only pay out a tiny little bit. Or, you know, if you get a download from iTunes, you're only making a small fraction.
Okay, let's come back for a second, because you just hit on something before that's kind of a sore point to me. And that's you're not making money from any of the streaming networks, and there's only a fraction of a cent that's coming back. And
right.
A lot of, you know, that frustrates many artists.
Right.
That being said, I think what the frustration here, and this is something I want to get across, is the sense of scale. And this is all brought about by the fact that everything in the music business once upon a time was kind of, the goal was to get 1 million. You hit 1 million and you were doing pretty good. You got a gold record or platinum record actually, and you know, you're making some money. So everything was kind of built around 1 million. And when you think about it, 1 million is a lot. But in the digital age, it's not. That's the big thing. People have to get their arms around this, that in fact 1 million isn't what it used to be when we're talking about something online. So it's a sense of scale here. The scale is blown up somewhat. A minor hit is around 50 million these days, a minor hit. When you hit 1 million, you know, you'll get some traction. You'll get some people that will kind of raise their eyebrow on it. But, you know, 50 million, that's when everybody wants a piece of you. When we get to 100 million, then we're talking 100 million plus, in the hundreds of millions, I should say. That's a hit. That's a real hit these days. And you're making some money. At that point, you can, even fractions of a cent, you can make some money. A worldwide global hit is now 1 billion.
That's a lot of streams.
It is. And I'm talking about streams or views, you know, on YouTube. Same thing.
Sure. And
at that point, there's really some money being made. There's 2 points in this. The first is, yes, you can make money, but you have to, your scale is different. Mm-hmm. So you have to think, well, you know, yeah, I only hit 300,000 or 100,000 or 50,000. And the thought is, well, where's my money at 50,000? Well, you know, you're not really in the game at that point. It seems like a lot, but it isn't.
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is there are a lot of fingers in the pie. And that's one of the things that you saw in the presentation that I did, was that there's a lot of money that's being made globally off of a hit. How much of it trickles down to the artist is, you know, that's the point that we're all trying to figure out, because not enough is floating down. It's been the music business, you know, that's the way it's always been. It's just, you figure that now everything would be more transparent because we could measure these things in real time almost, but it's not. Unfortunately. Yeah. So I just want to get that out of the way first, because it's a matter of, you know, adjusting your thinking on this. The fact that 1 million isn't what it was at one point, or maybe isn't what you think it is. Mm-hmm. Okay, so to get to your question, what should people do? See, the biggest thing is there's another mentality issue, and it might be different for your audience. I hope it is, actually. Most audiences are, and I'm talking about artists now, they're still wrapped up in this, I have to make an album. I have to do multiple songs, or even I have to make an EP. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't want to release them all at the same time. So, I mean, the big thing is, so if I were doing it again, what I would do is I'd go in the studio and I would start on 4 or 5 songs. And then I'd finish one, put it out, 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 like that. And once a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that. Mm-hmm. And that way you have different promotions. Now, I wouldn't do it any faster than that, because then the problem is you're asking your mailing lists and socials and, you know, followers, all that stuff. You're asking a little too much, because you keep this promotion seems to be constant, and you kind of need an ebb and flow in it. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the biggest thing, is to get your arms around the fact that you need constant releases.
Yeah.
And it has to be on multiple platforms as well. Videos are absolutely, you know, one of the things that you have to do. You want to release it to the major platforms, and do that early and often.
Yeah. Yeah. Staying top of mind with your audience and fan base is is super crucial, you know. And there's a guy named Ari Herstand who talks a lot about these type of
Sure.
things as well. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yeah. Smart guy.
He is, yeah. And some of the things he talked about is just constantly staying top of mind. You have to really almost kind of be everywhere at all times now, you know, with the social media. There's Instagram and Facebook, going to where your followers are and just constantly engage them. There's so much noise happening because it seems like so many artists are able to reach so many people now, and there's people have short attention spans scrolling through that timeline on Facebook or whatever. So having fresh new content in the single game, like you were saying, rather than releasing an EP, tons of songs at one time, having that dripped kind of content to stay top of mind and have fresh new things to share, it's really, really crucial. Am I right? Is that?
Well, yeah. And there's another thing, Dan. The fact of the matter is, when you release an album or an EP, whatever it is, you're just promoting one product at this point. And when you're doing, let's just say you did an EP and there's 4 songs on it, there's actually 5 products that you can promote. There's every single gets its own promotion, plus you put them together and then there's an EP. So there's 5. Yeah. And what that does, it also gives each song more of a chance for exposure, because you know what it's like. You get an album. If you get an album, a lot of people don't anymore, but if you do, you kind of skim through everything and you pick a couple songs that you like, and that's all you listen to. So most of them don't ever get a fair chance. And this way, at least you're giving each one a fair shot, I think. So it works out.
Yeah, let's take a quick step back. You know, a lot of this presentation, I learned a ton as far as what it looks like for the rights and the royalties of these songs being released for artists, what that actually looks like on the back end. Because there's, myself included, there's so many artists and people that listen to this podcast who don't really understand the legal side or the payment side of how that actually works in the digital age that we're in. And you had some great things to share. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. Just, I think it's good for people to stay educated, whether they have 50 million streams or whether they have, you know, just 10 or 20 streams. Like, why is it the way it is in the digital world with releasing your music online, and who's getting paid, and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny because all over the world, this question keeps on coming up. Yeah. I just read something this morning in England where there was a new organization that was getting together to find out where all the money was going, all the streaming money was going. So, I mean, this is something that black box money, I think you've heard about black box money, which is money that's collected, but they don't know where to send it. So there's royalties being collected, and they're sitting in they call it a black box, but what it is sitting in escrow someplace or in a bank account. And this is for every Spotify. It's for, you know, this for every streaming service,
Pandora, all those places.
Yeah, all those. And the problem, usually the biggest problem, is metadata, and this is something that artists really can't get their arms around either. You have to pay attention to that because that's how you get paid. And if you slip up on that in any way, there may be royalties that are owed to you that you won't be able to get. And the new Music Modernization Act is actually trying to fix that.
Yep, I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
That just passed. They're trying to fix it. That being said, what will happen is there's going to be like a limitation of 2 or 3 years. So if you don't claim that money in that particular time, you're done. You know, you can't go back and get it. Yeah. But, you know, it's one of those things.
So how do you claim that money? That's my question. So, I mean, the ISRC code, that's a form of metadata, isn't it? That's being tracked in a song. And most distributors will these days give you that when you release it, right? Like for distributors, for example, if I release a song, they're going to send it out to iTunes, Spotify, all these places. And they usually attach an ISRC code to your song, right? It gives it that info stamped in the track.
Yes, but who owns that?
Right. That's what I'm getting at. Exactly. So you talked about 2 different types of streaming online these days. You talked about what's called non-interactive streaming, and you talked about interactive streaming. Can you define both of those for us, what that looks like?
Okay, non-interactive streaming acts like a radio station. And in other words, it's Pandora. There used to be some other ones. Last FM was another one, but they're gone. It's mostly Pandora and Sirius XM, who now owns Pandora. So, and also the other thing that counts is if you have cable television and the music only channels, that sometimes up in the 900s there's a dozen different channels, music channels. That also counts in this. That's non-interactive streaming. Mm-hmm. So that pays at a much lower rate than interactive streaming. Interactive basically means that you physically say, I want to play this song.
Sure.
That's Spotify, Apple Music. It's just about all of them.
Most of them, yeah.
And that pays at a higher rate. But it goes even another step because each of these, interactive and non-interactive, have usually two different tiers as well. There's a free tier, ad-supported tier, and there's a premium tier or a paid tier. So you're paying $9.95 a month, $9.99 a month. And the paid tier pays a lot more than the free tier. So then it comes down to, where are most of your streams coming from? Let's just say that you're lucky enough that you got your 50 million streams.
It's a good day.
Well, it's not necessarily over a day, but you've accumulated you've accumulated a bunch. The problem is, where are these streams coming from? Are they coming mostly from the non-interactive service? Well, that means you're going to get paid a whole lot less. Than if it's coming from an interactive service. If it's on an interactive service, and most of them, or it doesn't matter which service that they're coming from, it then matters, did the people pay or not? And if they didn't pay, that's a whole lot less still. So what that means is you can have a whole bunch of streams and not get paid a lot because of the type of stream it is. Mm-hmm. If somebody pays for it with a subscription, you're going to make a lot more money.
Mm-hmm. And that blew my mind. I had no idea that was an actual thing, because a lot of times you look at a stream and you're like, oh, well, I should be making this much. And that's not true. Those premium Spotify people that are paying are actually helping you earn a little more per stream.
They're gold. Yes, they're great. And you get paid about twice as much, actually, between the free tier and the paid tier. So it means a lot. Now it goes another step. Which country are the streams coming from? Mm-hmm. Because not all countries pay the same. And the reason why is, here we're used to paying $9.99 a month, but in certain countries they're paying $2.99. They're paying, $1.84, I think, in India. So obviously you can have a lot of streams there and not make a lot of money because the subscribers aren't paying a lot to begin with.
That's wild.
So you have all of these variables that are going into it that most people don't understand. Mm-hmm. Then the other thing that people don't understand is, and this is something that I tried to get across in my presentation to everybody, and I like to talk about, because this is the thing that starts the rumors and the fallacies going on, the myths of getting paid. You read these stories where someone will say, I had 3 million streams and I only made $6.80. And then you think, okay, where did the streams come from? And it's never really specified. You have to understand that the streams are different. They're paying at different rates, but there are 3 royalty streams as well. There are 3 royalties that are paid from Spotify, for instance. Mm-hmm. So you're getting paid on the song itself, on the recording. That's paying the most. And then there's publishing. There's actually 2 publishing royalties that you're getting. And they're paying a whole lot less, about 1/6 less. So usually the people that will be complaining the most are songwriters that don't understand this. And they'll be saying, well, gee, I only got $6 or whatever. And then it's like, well, okay, but are you counting both of your publishing royalties or just one? Do you have any co-writers? Because if you have co-writers, then, that's cutting into it as well. And look at all the songs now that have 6 and 8 and 10 and 12 co-writers.
Sure.
Hard to make money on publishing that way.
Yeah.
So see, there's so many variables here, and I can go on and on about all the variables that are, and they're not put in there in order to take advantage of the artist.
Hmm.
There's so many different situations that's why all these came up.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that's just the way it kind of worked.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example where things might change. There are things called bundles. So if you happen to get a Spotify account with, I think it's Sprint.
Yeah.
If you're at Sprint, you get the free Spotify.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You're paying a whole lot less per month than if you bought it directly from Spotify, which means that whoever's listening is getting less on the stream. They're paying less going out. Yeah. So see, there's all these variables involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally just a crazy crossroads of payouts and who's getting paid what and how much and so many variables. Yeah. Yeah.
That being said, there's lots and lots of money in this. There's tons of money, and there's going to be more. So it's not something to get discouraged about. It's something to say, well, wait a second, there's a big pot of money out there, and I can get me some too.
Yeah, there like I think you mentioned there's 22 streaming royalties you could earn money from. I think you mentioned something about that in your presentation. There's a lot of different royalties out there.
There's a lot of royalty streams, yeah. And plus, there's a lot of different streaming services that are all paying. And usually, again, we think, well, we made this from Spotify. Yeah, but you're probably making something similar or more from other services. For instance, Tidal pays the most of anybody.
Okay.
Of any of the streaming services.
Didn't realize
so if you're getting a lot of Tidal streams, you're actually doing pretty good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about different types of copyrights related to streaming as well. You talk about sound recording, composition, and then we could talk about the performance royalty. You kind of dove into some of those things. What's the difference between like a sound recording copyright and a composition?
Well, if you think about it, sound recording is the actual recording. It's the song that you're hearing.
Right.
And if you think about publishing, in the old days, it was all about sheet music, and it's not sheet music anymore, although that's a part of it, but it's the songwriters getting paid. Yeah. So if you wrote something, if you wrote a piece of that song, you're also getting paid.
Yeah.
Or you should be.
Right.
This is where the metadata falls down, by the way, because what'll happen is someone will put the right metadata in on a song when they upload it. And this is even record labels that do this. And they'll put the artist in, all that's good. They don't put the songwriters in, or they don't get them right, or they don't put the proper publishing companies in. And if that's not in the metadata, they're not getting paid. So all that stuff has to be there. You should easily be able to get it there when you submit the song. There are fields for all of this.
Yeah, through your distributor, right?
Yeah, but you have to be diligent about putting it all in. And many people aren't. They just want to get it out there, so they forget about it, and that's why you don't get paid. But, to be honest with you, record labels do this too. Record labels are able to do direct uploads. They don't have a distributor, so to speak. So they don't use TuneCore, CD Baby, or DistroKid or anything. They're going directly to the services, and they have a separate app. This is kind of mind-numbing work for the most part. It's important, but it's mind-numbing. The way it works is, it's easy if there's one songwriter or two songwriters. That's easy. When you get 8 songwriters involved,
yeah,
and you don't have enough fields, for instance, that's just a simple thing. You don't have enough fields to put them all in.
A lot of the people, I think, on this podcast are the songwriters themselves most of the time, right? They're the ones that are actually making the track. So they are getting that sound recording and the composition as far as the copyrights are concerned and things like that. Let's talk a little bit about performance royalties. There are companies out there like ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, what we would call PROs or performing rights organizations. Why is that important for artists to sign up with one of those, or why should they?
Well, performance royalties are all around us, first of all. That's the traditional way that there's 2 publishing royalties, basically. There's mechanical royalty and there's a performance royalty. The mechanical royalty originally was on if you think of a CD, for instance, as soon as that CD was sold, there was a flat rate that was taken off the top that was sent for publishing, and it was 9.1 cents per song. It still is 9.1 cents per song. You get paid out. And when you think about it, that's why songwriters are making a lot of money, because they're, you know, if you had a song on a big hit album, you were making a lot of dough. The other one that's mechanical. Performance is when it plays on the radio, for instance. Every time it plays, you should be making money. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the easiest way to think about it. So it plays on the radio, they put in their log, it played, you make money from that. Well, in the early days of streaming music, that wasn't the case at all. There was only the one royalty. So what ended up happening was it took a while there was only a performance royalty, and it took a while to actually figure out, well, wait a second, there should be a mechanical royalty involved in this as well. So now, I think the last 3 or 4 years that's been involved. So you have 2 royalties. You have a performance and a mechanical. They pay about the same. There's a very small difference between both of them. But when you put them together, they're significant. They're, I don't know, a fifth, a sixth of what the recording is making, what the artist is making. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it could be some good dough.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I got a check last year, I think, for $11 from.
There you go, Starbucks. Two trips to Starbucks.
Right, it's something, you know, and I can't complain. But just for the simple fact of just registering, you know, through I used BMI, and it was pretty easy to do, and had like a fair amount of streams and radio time in the Philippines. I was like, okay, sure, that's cool. I had no idea. But yeah, I mean, having a PRO to be able to kind of catch those things when it does happen could be some extra money that you never realized was out there on the table.
Well, it's not only that; it's they're going to be collecting for publishing royalty on Pandora, Sirius XM, radio, if it happens, hit radio someplace. They're also, you know, they're collecting on it all. So it's worth it, because that's a big part, you know, of what you're making. So you might as well make it. Now, that being said, they do take about 11% of what you made as an administration fee. I
didn't realize it was that high.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit. Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting how they actually do that. The technology behind that, they all have kind of their own, from what I understand, like proprietary audio recognition of being able to pull that off of the cyber interweb somehow. I don't know how they do it, but being able to gather when a track is played that's been registered and just register it, you know, from all over the world. It's kind of mind-boggling how they actually do that.
Well, it's not from all over the world. It's the United States, mostly. Well,
I guess it depends who your PRO is, yeah.
Yeah, because there's different PROs in different countries.
And I think CSAC is mainly Canada, right?
They were not anymore, but they're a distant third.
Yeah,
to ASCAP and BMI.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about different kinds of royalties. Talked about performance royalties. So in conclusion, one thing you basically said as in your presentation is, I mean, you can get paid from multiple sources around the world. If you had to tell an artist, these are the things that you should definitely do to make sure you get paid, that could be money on the table you didn't realize is out there when you release a song into, you know, the internet through your distributor, what are some actionable steps they should be taking, an artist?
Oh, metadata. But also signing up with the Sound Exchange and a PRO like ASCAP or BMI or CSAC. Sound Exchange is important because that's collecting royalties from Pandora. Again, if it's a non-interactive streams that's collecting on. So that's how you get paid. And Pandora is a government agency, but they're a very transparent government agency. Unlike everyone else, I don't think they take any money at all. If they do, it's very small. And also, what they do is they make sure that people like featured artists and producers also get paid. Because otherwise, the way it works is if you're a producer, it's a kind of a handshake deal with the artist. So you say, well, I want five points of what you get. And then the artist makes the money, and then the artist pays out to the producer, which doesn't always happen, as you can probably imagine. Now with Sound Exchange, it's transparent. You know, the artist signs off on it and it just goes right from Sound Exchange to the producer or engineer or featured artist.
Yeah. So Sound Exchange is basically kind of like its own PRO.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a PR. Well, it's a collection agency, yes, for again, non-interactive streaming.
I've heard it not being referred to as a PRO, but in nature, in essence, it kind of is. So it can be confusing. I have a Sound Exchange account as well, and I think they have a backlog of 3 years that they'll track for you by the time you create your account. So if you haven't done that yet, everybody listening, if you've released anything through distribution, soundexchange.com, go there and get an account to see if, you know, there's anything in the future you could be making money from. So we talked about that. Is there anything else that artists should be doing proactively to make sure that metadata is captured to save their butts in some ways when they're releasing music in the world?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, you know who you are as an artist and you know where to put that in. So that's not a problem. The record label sometimes helps. I mean, if it's your own label, you still have to put that in. If you're the songwriter, you put that in, but publishing company, you need a publishing company. And even if it's yours and even if it's something you just made up today and you keep on using it, that's fine. But, you know, you have to put that in as well. So, you know, it's another thing you should do. Not to say that you can't use a major publisher or you can't one day sign with the major publisher. You can. But, you know, for all this, you need a publishing company. That questions are going to keep on coming up and up and up and up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you even get songs rejected because you don't have that information. There are some streaming services that will reject your submission because that's not in there.
And the type of song has a lot to do with that too, whether it's a cover, right? If it's a cover, you probably have to get certain things like a mechanical license.
Well, in theory, you know, the way that works is if you're going to do a cover, you go to the publisher and say, I want to do this. And they'll always say, yeah, no problem, but it's going to cost you this. So you're going to have to cough up money. Yeah. So the way people have done it is kind of do it and then ask for forgiveness later. when the publisher comes after him, you say, oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
My bad. Yeah, here's...
Yeah. And sometimes they never come because it's not worth it. Mm-hmm. That being said, you know, what I've seen songwriters and publishers do. One songwriter, and I know this for a fact, there was a song that he wrote that there was a cover that was happening, and all of a sudden it was blowing up. And he waited before he made any kind of copyright claim until it hit millions and millions and millions. And the reason why was he could make more money at that point and also have a much stronger case. So that will happen a lot of times where you won't hear from anybody unless something blows up, and then people come out of the woodwork looking for you.
They're like, hey, I'd like some money. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I am a little curious about for me personally, and I know a lot of our listeners on this podcast release remixes. So they'll take an actual sample of a song, chop it up, and put it in their own music, and they want to release it as their own. Is there any advice that you have for those people when they're trying to release that, even if it's on SoundCloud or something else? Is that a similar concept where it's like ask for forgiveness later kind of thing?
Well, again, don't take this as legal advice. I'm not an attorney, and an attorney would not tell you to do that. Right. An attorney would tell you go see the publisher first and pay out of your pocket. Right. So don't take this as legal advice. I'm not encouraging you to do that. I'm just saying I've seen other people do this. So we're straight on that. You know, a remix is the same as a sample, is the same as, you know, doing a cover song. Really, you need permission. And the more songs you have, obviously, the more permission you need. You know, I'll give you a real world example that I went through. I was producing a TV show. I produced a few TV shows, music TV shows in the past. And there was one called Desert Island Music. And Desert Island Music was all about talking to a star, a music celebrity, and finding the songs that influenced him or her the most. So we'd have somebody there talking about it and say, oh, yeah, it was this or this and this. And then we play the bits of the song. It sounded very innocent, no problem. We weren't playing long pieces. When we got through the first episode, there was something like 40 different songs that were in it. And the attorneys saw it and from the network and hit the roof. And they said, do you realize how much this is going to cost? And it blew the budget right out of the water. And it blew the show off the air before it even happened because we just couldn't afford it.
Wow.
And it's all for music rights. Yeah.
That's great.
And it's worse, especially with picture. If it's just audio, it's one thing. If it's with picture, it's completely different. And usually it's more expensive.
I've always heard that two of the best ways to make money is you can go into music law if you want to be in the music business. And then you can be the one that goes after those people who use songs illegally in picture or film or something or whatever. Or, you know, you release.
Yeah, I'm not so sure how happy a gig that is, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's probably true too. Yeah, I mean, another thing you talked about in conclusion in your presentation is don't pay attention to just one royalty metric when you're going back to looking at the streams. Look at everything with all the details. You know, there's multiple ways you can make money off of streams and different royalties and payments. You know, having an account with Sound Exchange, making sure you enter everything right in the metadata with your distributor, whether it's DistroKid or SoundCloud or whoever. And then, you know, other things as well. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, that's pretty much it. It's, you know, again, if you do the right things and you just get in the habit of doing them, then you eliminate the problems. So it's, you know, just get used to putting all that info in up front. Once you sign up, you go through the it's not torture anymore. It's kind of easy. Sign up with a pro and a PRO and with a Sound Exchange and get all that together. You only have to do that once. It's fairly easy after that.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say another thing you talked about is setting up your own publishing company. And you mentioned Independent Music Published Association, impa.org.
Yes.
That's one thing I have not done. Why is that important?
The IMPA, it's only like $50 a year to be an associate member. But if you want to learn about the publishing business, that's the absolute best place. They have so much information. They have a constant stream of panels with industry experts and movers and shakers. They have all sorts of conferences. There's always something going on, and it's always up-to-date information that's coming out. And like I say, if you have any questions about any of this, you can find the answers easily there. impa.org, Independent Music Publishers Association. I have a good friend who was the president of it recently, in the recent past. And I knew about it before, but I knew a lot more after talking to him and going to events and everything. And it's definitely worthwhile. There's some really cool things that you'll understand after that. Again, if you want to find out how to make money in that part of the business, this is a good way to do it. And for, you know, what it costs you, it's not much. So it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah.
Time with it. But yeah, I mean, thank you for joining the podcast. I know we're getting tight on time. I want to respect your time. There's a lot of really good stuff that we talked about here. I think people can chew on. Is there anything else about what we talked about that you'd like to add?
No, I think I hit the major points here. You know, again, it's whenever you see an article, post, anything about a video, anything that has to do with royalties, just think to yourself, what royalties are they talking about? Are they talking about publishing? Or are they talking about recording royalties? You know, that will actually lead you to different ways of thinking about it, because a lot of times the people that are writing these things don't understand themselves. So you get a skewed perspective on things. So what I'm trying to do is clear a lot of that up as much as I can, where it's like, oh, wait, there's a lot of different ways this can go. Just realize that up in front. You don't have to know it except to know that there's a lot of different royalties. There's a lot of different, you know, ways it's paid out. and it's not always represented correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that and the other thing would be get your arms around the fact that the scale of everything has changed now with streaming. The fact that everything is bigger.
Yeah.
The numbers are bigger that you need.
No, this is all good stuff. I really appreciate your time and coming out and sharing all this with us. This is good stuff. I would encourage anybody listening to go check out Bobby's website. It's BobbyOwsinskis.com. That's OWSINSKI, BobbyOwsinski.com. Go check that out. I know you have some good courses out there for anybody who wants to dive more into the mixing, and you've got a lot of great resources. You have some great books. Encourage everybody to go check those out for sure. Thank you for coming out and hanging out today, and we'll have you back another time on the podcast.
No problem, Dan. Next time we can talk about mixing.
Yeah, we could.
Or audio.
Yeah, I could talk about that for years, really. That'll be a long episode.
Well, anytime, Dan.
Cool. Well, have a great week, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks, man. Take care.
Thanks, Bobby. I'll see you later. This podcast is sponsored by liveproducersonline.com, a community of Ableton Live users connecting you to the pros to learn today's music production.